Wolfman is written and directed by Lee Whannel and stars Christopher Abbott and Julia Garner in a sort of modern retelling of the classic werewolf story. I wouldn't say this is a reboot of any particular film. It's just another werewolf film. So before I kick off my review, I just want to make it clear that I really do enjoy Lee Whannell's work. I think what he did on The Invisible Man was so interesting in terms of not only doing a really successful update on a classic story, but putting a really fresh twist on it. So to make The Invisible Man more about domestic violence, actually I thought it was so seamless, so well done, and sort of quite nuanced actually in terms of how it played out. And I guess that probably leads me on to tell you why I'm caveating that, because I just felt like that nuance was really, really missing in Wolfman. And I'm kind of happy to kind of go into why. So just to give a rough sort of plot, there's a guy played by Christopher Abbott. We see him at the start of the film as a young boy. His dad's sort of this sort of survivalist guy, and has all this kind of obsession with keeping him safe and protection. So something's clearly happened in his life to make him like that. And that kind of ends, and then we go to the modern day, and Christopher Abbott has now grown up. Him and his wife and their daughter Ginger live in San Francisco, and he apparently has taken on this trauma. He's got the similar obsession with protecting his daughter, and from there we find out that his dad has been kind of missing for a long time in the Oregon mountains where he grew up, and has been now legally declared dead. So they all agree that it would be good as a family to go up to those Oregon mountains, into the home, and have a time together to bond and all those kind of things, which is not a great idea as it turns out. So before I kind of get into the negatives, because I did think this was very mid, and I'm kind of blown away actually by some of the reviews online that are giving this more than an average review. I just think it was just distinctly average. I will say there was some kind of plus points. I think there's this whole segment which most people were calling out, where you kind of want to see how things are playing out from the sort of werewolf's perspective, and throughout the film, the kind of the hook is that. So yeah, Christopher Abbott is the one turning into a werewolf, and it's sort of displayed as like an illness. It's like a sickness, and it sort of tries to do the same thing as The Fly does. That rather than a gradual transformation, we see this kind of person start to break down, and we see that from his perspective in these very cool, I understand that they were achieved practically, scenes where the viewpoint will switch from him to kind of his family and back. So you kind of see how both are approaching the situation. And I thought that was probably the most interesting part of the film. In terms of how it was filmed, it looks really nice. And actually, I think Christopher Abbott was really the heart of the film. Like, he really did put a lot into it. And I think if it had focused more on him and his sort of emotional journey, that probably would have kind of kept it going for me. I think the fact is you lose his sort of humanity quite quickly. So therefore, it sort of stops becoming about any kind of sympathy or pity for him, because he's not really aware of what's happening and he's already changed. Otherwise, this is a bit of an odd one. It's a very strange movie, and I was thinking this as I watched it. As just, again, it's a horror film, and it's, we're used to horror films where characters make really odd decisions, but for Lee Whannell, who's written something as sort of smart as The Invisible Man, he's responsible for the Insidious franchise, he came up with the whole of the Saw franchise. There were just such big, glaringly weird, obvious things that were happening that just threw it off for me. So I think the main thing for me, and this is probably more of a direction thing, this is no slight on the actors, but there was a real emotion missing from this film. So Christopher Abbott was really good. I really felt his kind of emotion from the get-go. He had some depth to him. But this film takes place over the course of must be about 6 hours maximum. It starts late at night in terms of the main action piece, and then it goes on until the early morning. And his wife and daughter are literally watching him transform into a werewolf. I mean, they don't know that that's what he's transforming into, but his transformation is horrific. His skin is disforming, he can't communicate, he's sweating, the teeth are falling out, and their reaction to that is so muted and so kind of nonchalant. I just don't understand it, and I would like to think that it wouldn't have been the actors, because a good director would have just sort of stopped the movie and said, hang on, we need more from here. These characters are going through hell. Their dad and their husband is literally dying in front of their eyes, transforming into something hideous. And I just felt like they don't really seem to care that much. And if that's just me, I just really didn't get it. And it made me then not really feel like I wanted to care, because no one in this film really seemed that bothered. Even the ending, it seemed like they were just resigned to, well, he wants this to be kind of over, so without too many spoilers, it ends. And I just didn't get like a big emotional gut punch from that. It was very strange. It was a very odd, kind of muted way of doing things. And then on the flip side of that, like there's these very emotional moments. So the beginning of the film is this survivalist dad, and we're supposed to believe that he's passed all this trauma to his son because he's so angry with this kid and really unreasonable. And it's like, no, the kid was being stupid and running off in the woods with a gun. So the dad naturally was getting angry with him. And I don't think we saw enough of that to really kind of get this whole trauma thing. And then immediately after that, Christopher Abbott's character then tells his daughter off because she's balancing on this like barrier thing in the middle of the city next to like moving traffic, falls into the path of a homeless guy. And he basically is like very nicely telling her to get down a number of times. And then eventually he's like, snaps at her and says, get down, why are you not listening to me? And then immediately apologizes and goes into this big spiel about, I'm there to protect you. It's really, really overblown. It's really, really overdone and very strange. And it comes back later again where that message about, I passed my trauma down to my kids is just whacked over our head relentlessly. And it's just very odd. And then I think lastly, in terms of just odd plot points, and this is very like horror trope, but the characters, and I don't think this is a big spoiler because it's predominantly what the film is about, but the characters end up in the childhood home of Christopher Abbott's character, and they're sort of they're escaping the werewolf that's prowling around outside. They've just been chased by it, and they're in this quite big open plan house where all the doors and windows internally kind of are all quite open, and rooms flow to one another. There are windows and doors everywhere. There's a back door, there's big lounge windows, there's a big window, like various windows to the outside where this creature can be seen. And they spend most of that sort of first act barricading one front door. When I know it's a film and I know that they need a thing to keep it going, but they could have just gone to a room and barricaded themselves in and they probably would have been all right. The house has a basement with one way in and one way out that they could have barricaded in themselves until the morning, when likely is, the werewolf will be gone. Clearly, the dad in the film has been turned into a werewolf and they don't know that. But there's just not a lot of logic. And unfortunately, the film, because it's only set in one place, and I get that there's supposed to be a claustrophobia to that, but it starts to just become a bit of a like, let's go to the farmhouse, let's go to the car, let's go to the greenhouse, let's go back to the farmhouse, let's go to the barn. It becomes just a little bit kind of plodding in terms of, well, we're just going to go here, there and everywhere and kind of do the same beats. But again, with no real emotion behind it. Something about Julia Garner as well. I don't know what it is. I haven't seen Julia Garner in Ozark, and I understand that's probably one of her best performances. I don't know whether she's just really good at playing unlikable characters. And I understand in Ozark she's supposed to be a mercenary, horrible character. I've seen her now in maybe 3 films, and The Royal Hotel is the one that really stuck out. There's something very obnoxious about the characters she plays. She always seems to play someone very uptight, very kind of odd and very unreasonable. And, she's kind of the same in this. There's this weird scene where on the way to the dad's ranch, they meet a guy who, is clearly saying, "Oh, I knew you as a kid. We used to be friends, and I'm a local." And she's like, "No, don't talk to him. He's got a gun. No, don't let him into the car." Like, this guy's trying to help them. He's trying to kind of like help them find the ranch. And she's like, "No, you can't. Like, he's dangerous. I don't think you should." It's like, you know each other. Like, leave the guy alone. He's just in the middle of the woods, and like, it's America. He has a gun. Like, the character is like, yeah, everyone has guns here. The Royal Hotel as well. She was just such a like, I don't know, very stuck up, very strange, very held in kind of character. And I think that just translated to here. I just never really felt like she was that bothered about her husband dying or anything. And even the little girl, they had this weird bond, the girl and the dad character did. And yet, I don't know, like she doesn't really cry that much. She doesn't seem to be looking that upset. And I just thought it really dragged the movie down. And I think broadly it's a very average film. I think there's a couple of good scares. It's quite nicely filmed, but for this to come from Lee Whannel, who's done all that really good stuff, and for someone who was able to reboot The Invisible Man in such a creative way, there's just no real creativity here. Like, I get that there's this thing that, you know, a werewolf curse is now an illness, but that's kind of it. And it just ends up being stretched over like a long time. The transformation is pretty good. It's pretty gruesome. There are a couple of moments of gore where I was actually quite uncomfortable watching it. But I don't know, I think without Christopher Abbott, it would have had almost no soul or heart at all. So, yeah, I feel like I've not had a great start this year in terms of movies so far. And it is January, and I wasn't necessarily expecting this to be amazing. Werewolf films, apart from American Werewolf in London, are not exactly my biggest genre favourite. But not a great film. For me, it's a basic 5 out of 10. I think there's some stuff to enjoy. It's a proper Friday night popcorn movie, but beyond that, I would say there's not much to warrant paying to see this. Maybe save it for streaming. Anyway, that was my review of Wolfman. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will be back soon.